You're listening to Tehachapi with Key Budge, Corey Costelloe, and Greg Garrett.
Welcome to a special Celebration of Freedom episode of Tehachapi. We wanted to acknowledge and recognize our military members, both past and present, on the 4th of July. I'm Key Budge. Both Corey Costelloe and Greg Garrett will be joining me a little later as we talk to U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Matthew Higer, who is the new base commander at Edwards Air Force Base. I know you'll enjoy that conversation. And with the salute to our active duty and veterans, we asked you to send messages of love and encouragement. We'll hear from family and friends and read special notes for those that fear emotions may overwhelm them if they try to send us a voice-recorded shout-out. Also, a reading of the Declaration of Independence read by Corey Costelloe. I believe it was the first time I've ever heard a complete reading of this document. I hope you take away something special, a sense of pride for being an American on this day. Let's start things out with a couple of special messages for our veterans and active duty military. First, Congressman Kevin McCarthy, followed by State Senator Shannon Grove and Tehachapi Mayor Susan Wiggins.
As Americans, we live in the greatest nation on earth. And for the last 244 years, our country has embodied the freedom and hope that so many others aspire to. As we celebrate our nation's history and independence, I'm confident that together we are moving towards a more perfect union. And though we look to the future, it is also incumbent upon us to recognize the past and the generations of military men and women who have served our country bravely. The United States of America would not be the land of the free and the home of the brave if it wasn't for them. So to our troops across the globe, thank you for your sacrifice and courage in order to ensure our country's safety and freedom. May you have a happy Independence Day, and may God bless you.
As the first female veteran elected to the state legislature, a member of the Governor's Military Council, and the vice chair of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, I'm honored to join in recognizing our incredible veterans, the men and women in uniform who have risked their lives for our freedom. The 4th of July is a celebration of the freedoms we enjoy because of the sacrifices that our veterans have made. We must do everything we can to honor those who have given so much to protect our freedoms and defend the United States of America from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I hope you have a safe and fun 4th of July. God bless our veterans, and God bless the United States of America.
Hi, this is Mayor Susan Wiggins from the city of Tehachapi. I wanted to be able to pay tribute to our veterans and our active duty servicemen in this age that we're in right now that we've never experienced before, where the world seems to have gone mad. The only constant is that we can count on our active duty officers and enlisted men. We can thank our veterans from the last 200 years for all of our freedoms that we enjoy. Even when all this is going on, we are still having freedoms. And there's no way that I could ever say enough to repay those men and women who fought on our shores in other countries and protecting us. And for that, I commend them and give them all the glory.
A shout out to John Carey, retired Air Force. Thank you for your many years of service, and I love you, my friend.
My great-uncle, Joseph Costelloe, United States Army 45th Infantry Division, passed away on January 8, 2020 at his home in Arizona. A member of the 45th Infantry Thunderbirds, he served his country valiantly as part of the assault on Anzio in Italy on January 22, 1944. He enlisted in the Army at the outset of World War II, much to the chagrin of my great-grandfather, who was an Irish immigrant, initially viewed it as England's war, not knowing at the time Hitler's evil, but firmly believing that after the battle for Irish independence, that England had once again ensnared his family from overseas. Years later, it was mentioned by a priest at his wake that my great-grandfather would visit Our Lady of Perpetual Help, now a basilica in my family's original neighborhood of Sunset Park in Brooklyn, New York, every morning for the 6 a.m. Mass to say a prayer for Uncle Joe before embarking on the long walk to his job at Bethlehem Steel. My family members back east still recall that for the entire war, during every holiday or Sunday dinner, my great-grandmother Anastasia would set Joe's place at the table.
This dedication goes out to Senior Airman Wyatt Budge from his mother, Terry Budge. Proud Mama. What are little boys made of? Snips and snails and puppy dog tails. That is what little boys are made of. But my boy is also made of courage and respect, love and affection, morals and manners, inner and outer strength and mental toughness. You are humble and kind. You are brave and patriotic. You are daring and adventurous. You are smart and wise beyond your years. You are thoughtful and inspiring to others. You are happy-go-lucky and funny, and you have a smile that lights up the room. I am so proud of you and all your accomplishments and the man you have become. There are not enough words to tell you how much I love you and how proud I am of you. I am so lucky and blessed to be your mom. I'll love you forever. I'll like you for always. As long as I am living, my baby you'll be. These things we do that others may live. Love, Mom.
You're listening to Tehachapi.
Joining us here on Tehachapi, Brigadier General Matthew Higer from Edwards Air Force Base. General, thank you so much for taking the time and participating with us here on the show.
Absolutely. It's always good to communicate with the folks that are big fans of our community partners, and I'm extremely happy to be here.
Edwards Air Force Base has such a pivotal role in our community. I mean, we've got a lot of people that are contractors that work at the base. We've got active duty members that live off base in our community. Living in the Antelope Valley, I got to see Edwards and things taking off and things that were secret, and it's just the history behind the base is just so incredible.
Well, I don't think you saw anything secret, Keith. If they didn't want you to see it, you didn't see it, right?
That's right.
That's true.
But Edwards is if you're not working or you don't have a family member that works active military or contractor on the base, you really don't know a lot about Edwards. But Edwards provides an amazing economic machine for Kern County. I think the base spans Kern County, San Bernardino County, so on and so forth. You have 11,000 active duty reserve, civil service defense contractors, and then over 7,000 military. So can we talk a little bit about that? So educate our listeners on more about Edwards and what you actually provide to this community of Kern County and our region.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to, and there's a bunch of ways I can answer that question. So I'll throw out some numbers for you. Your list of counties was one shy. We're also just a little bit into LA County, too.
Mm-hmm,
so
that's right.
The majority of it's Kern County, and typically the base aggregates much closer to Kern than the other two, but it's technically in all three counties. It happens to be the second largest Air Force base in the United States. If you overlay the entire National Capital Region on top of Edwards Air Force Base, the landmass, we're still about twice as big. And so it's a gigantic piece of the installation. The history on why we're here is fantastic. It's basically the lake bed, right? It was a great place to test. It was lots of sunny days, and as much as we occasionally will lament about the constant wind here, that actually was very helpful in testing airplanes when we came here, and still to this day can be as well. But good weather, not much rain. The lake bed itself, if anyone's ever been on it, it's very much the consistency of asphalt. If you walk on it, it's not quite as hard as concrete, but it's good solid asphalt. And then there's like a little talcum powder that ends up on the bottom of your boots. It's pretty neat. And in my case, almost a religious experience to be out on the lake bed and think about the things that have been out there. Let me give you a quick little history on my first two knowledge of Edwards. Many of you listening will probably not be old enough to remember television, let alone television that was broadcast TV, like I bet the hosts do. But $6 Million Man, Steve Austin. I remember watching that as a little kid growing up, and I didn't know until much later in life that the scene at the opening credits was actually a very infamous, famous crash on Rogers Dry Lake bed here at Edwards. So I remember watching that every time $6 Million Man was on, and it was one of my favorite shows, and I didn't know it was Edwards, and once I pieced it together, that was kind of neat.
I'm going to date myself. I remember that.
I do too.
Yeah, it's kind of an admission of what decade of life you're in, right?
Corey has no idea.
I haven't turned 40 yet, so I don't remember that. I know the name, don't know the opener.
He's still learning. Still learning.
And you've got airmen on your base that say a $6 Million Man. Is he a rookie in the NFL?
Yeah, right?
Exactly. So the second thing with Edwards is kind of hit on what one of you said a little earlier. Is the father of some very good friends of mine growing up was an Air Force veteran, and he would tell a story about the one time he was at Edwards Air Force Base in the late 1960s. He snapped a picture on his camera of an airplane flying, pieced together history, and it would have been an SR-71. The cops discovered that he had taken the picture and confiscated his camera. So if you have any pictures of things you took here and the camera's been confiscated, that's one sure way to know you took a picture of something.
Yeah.
So those are my first two impressions or memories of Edwards, and I didn't realize till a lot later in life how that was. The first time I was actually physically on the base, I was in an altitude chamber with Jimmy Doolittle. Jimmy Doolittle III, the grandson of Jimmy Doolittle of the Tokyo Raiders. And so that was probably what set the hook and made me know I was going to be back.
I've been in that altitude chamber. I took an aviation class when I was in 7th grade here at Jacobson Junior High, but as a young adult, I was learning to fly, and somehow we got out there and was in the altitude chamber, and they gave us a piece of paper and had us do basic math, arithmetic. And
right.
as you get higher and higher, your oxygen levels start to go down, right? And you have trouble understanding and comprehending things. And so part of the training of being a test pilot or actually just a pilot. So pretty neat stuff. So many opportunities out there that people just don't realize. The technology is over the top.
Unfortunately, the chamber's gone, but the building's still here, and Jimmy D's still floating around the community.
Shoot,
but,
I'm now dating myself again.
Those were really good experiences, altitude chamber stuff.
General, I wanted to point out you have a very impressive military resume with the Air Force, obviously, but this is your third stop at Edwards Air Force Base. You were there as a student, you were there as a commandant, and now you're back as a brigadier general. What's that mean to you to be able to, I mean, you're basically now sort of running the place that you were a student at one point. I mean, that's got to be pretty cool in terms of accomplishments as a career.
It is. I tell you, I keep telling folks. In fact, I welcomed a friend of mine on the ramp today. He's the commander at the Air Force Operational Test and Evaluation Command. He flew in today to spend 3 days with us here, and we were captains together in Alaska. And I mentioned to him that I am yet another blind squirrel nut theory. Occasionally even a blind squirrel finds a nut, and he laughed and he said, "No, that's my line. You can't have that." So I guess I got to come up with a better one for you guys. But I tell you what, it is not lost on me when I was back as the commandant at Test Pilot School that I graduated in 2003 from TPS in December, and then took command of the school in summer of 2017. So math in public, 14-ish and a little bit years, and it flew by so fast. And to go back and have a job that Chuck Higer had at one point. In fact, the desk in the commandant's office is referred to as the Higer desk, and that was a purpose-built building for the school that General Higer was involved in along the way. It's just steep with history. And I remember walking out of the school one evening, so it was officially sunset at Edwards, and I'm looking west underneath the awning at Test Pilot School West, and I'm looking kind of through and around. There's an F-104, which has been highly modified, on a stick out there in front of the school. If you Google it, you'll be able to see those pictures. And they had just sent up a rocket or a missile or some kind of test event from Vandenberg. And so in the upper atmosphere, which was still sunlit, you could see this beautiful trail of a rocket going up and a sunset, gorgeous cirrus clouds in the sky, the NF-104, and standing in front of Test Pilot School. And I just hits you at moments like that this is a special place. So I snapped a picture. I texted to a few close friends of mine with that quote, and they responded with, absolutely, and couldn't agree more. And I can go on and on about those almost religious experiences that I've had here throughout the years. But it was great being back that second time. This is another good bonus. It's nice to get back to where the mission of a developmental test is done, and really at the cradle of test in the Air Force too.
Well, let's talk about the mission of the base. I know
Sure.
Whenever I talk to any personnel that come on the base, always talking about it's the mission. The mission is usually a part of a statement that I hear from your personnel. So can you tell us what's going on at the base?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mission of the 412 Test Wing is actually three things overlapped. We're what the Air Force would refer to as a mission wing, and our mission is test, and so we're labeled a test wing. Like a wing with a lot of C-17s or airlift aircraft is an airlift wing, or the combat wings I grew up in with F-16s are fighter wings. So we're a mission wing, and our mission is test. But we're also the installation command organization here, and that means we're responsible literally for the installation, the people, the buildings, the facilities, all that base operating support for Edwards Air Force Base. And then, fun fact, fun trivia, a lot of people think 412 Test Wing in Edwards, and that's what they think of. But if you do a quick little bit of research, you'll find out that we also are the installation command organization for Plant 42 as well. So everything that happens on Plant 42 is also under the purview of the 412 Test Wing, especially with all those the big mission partners we have down there from the Defense Industrial Base. So that's our second role, second job here in the wing. And then the third one is, I'll say a little more nuanced, but it's certainly just as impactful. The Department of Defense has designated certain facilities or ranges or combinations thereof as something known as a major range test facilities base. We have some of those components here as well. So the Benefield Anechoic Chamber, which is a gigantic soundstage. If you've ever seen pictures of it or heard in it, you can park a B-52 in there, big airlift airplanes, close the door, and it's not just impenetrable to sound, but it's also impenetrable to a lot of radar and other radio waves, so we can test it in an environment, in the airplane, in an environment where it thinks it's someplace else. And so that's a big asset that we have on the base. We have the range itself, where we can, do very precise things on the ground, and then we have the infrastructure that enables all that in the form of a control center. So think not quite the NASA Apollo mission control rooms, but pretty good size and certainly very high tech. And that all consists of what we call the range. So those are our three big mission areas: test, or an installation, actually two, and then we're also a big part of the nation's test infrastructure.
Now, with 11,000 people on the base, you're your own city. It has an economic impact, not only, in our region. I mean, it's huge. So I know the things that go on there, and you guys really have another mission to make sure you're taking care of the local communities around you.
Yeah, so I kind of left out you asked what the mission of the base was. I gave you the three big ones. But the person that's fortunate enough to have this job is also kind of like a mayor. You're almost literally a mayor of your little city. We have 750 or so residences, plus all the brand new airmen that live in dorms here, and that's generally 3,000 or so people that live here on the base. This is actually where they live, so you're a mayor there. But I think more importantly is that I really find the partnership with the local communities and the elected officials from those local communities very, very rewarding part of the job. Great Americans all, and boy, I tell you, the passion for what this valley or what this region does is palpable. When you get a couple of those folks together, it's amazing. Let me bridge back to a number you threw out, 11,000 and change at Edwards. It's a little bit more than that, but that's a pretty good number. But then you tack on approximately just shy of 9,000 people at Plant 42, and it's about 20,000 people that either live or come to work on one of these two installations every day. The government payroll alone that we pay out is nominally $700 million a year. There's other numbers that you can pile on the value of the contracts, and how do you turn that into economic impact is a longer discussion that I'm woefully not qualified to give you. But it's humbling, but it's also extremely exciting.
Yeah, and from an economic development profession where I'm at, I mean, obviously I see the impact of Edwards from just the folks living in Tehachapi, the commuters, the folks that are the contractors or active duty or working on projects or even working at Plant 42. So it's certainly out there. There are economic missions that are centered around Edwards Air Force Base. And yeah, I can see the comparison to a city, but don't sell yourself short. I love our mayor, but she's never flown an F-16. So, I mean, you got a little bit step up on most mayors in Kern County.
I may know a guy that could fix that problem, but we'll have to take that some other time.
Promo, of course.
I do.
Yeah, I was a past honorary commander for the base, and I got to serve with Promo and others and learn so much about the base. And that kind of leads me into my next kind of comment. What can the city of Tehachapi do, the community of Tehachapi do to help to continue to support your mission so that we can all better understand who you are, what you do, why you do it, and how we can support you and all of the folks that either live, work, or serve on Edwards Air Force Base?
So it's continue doing what you're doing as a community, as neighbors, as mission partners. That's really it. I want to tie these two together. Thought we've talked about previously and this one. We talk a lot about how many people are on the base, and we talk about payroll and economic impact and all that stuff. But I tell you, and I think you gentlemen would have stories on this as well, the impact to our nation and, quite frankly, the Western world that the collective generation after generation after generation of brain trust folks that have lived and worked and called these places home, you can't put a dollar figure on that. When you look at the history that's been made by the folks that have lived and worked in this region, it's amazing. And I will tell you the biggest thing in my, especially time as the commandant here and now, that Tehachapi does for the folks here is there are a lot of people that for reasons that are solely theirs and of their choice that say, you know what, I've done the on-base living thing, I want to go someplace else. Done the big city close to LA thing, I want to do something else. And then they run up to higher elevations or even the mountains around you guys, and they love it, right? So Tehachapi, the community, maybe not just the municipality, but the community up there in Bear Valley, right? Am I remembering that right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, it's the diversity of places that you can live and things to go do that is very beneficial, and a community that knows and understands that it takes a big team of people. We're not just the factory in the Antelope Valley and that's where you live. It's a little bit bigger than that. And it's simple things like I often get, glad to see you, happy to see you, glad you're here. I'll get, thank you for your service kind of messages all the time. And that definitely gets noticed, especially for folks that have family members that are downrange or have recently been downrange. Typically when I get that, they'll see me and they'll say, thank you for your service. And I'll smile, nod appreciatively and say, you know what, I'll pass it on to somebody that's getting shot at today. Because right now I'm standing here very comfortable, very secure in the glorious Aerospace Valley.
And you've mentioned, you talked about the things to do in Tehachapi. You frequent the area for kind of a mental release, don't you?
I do. So occasionally I get to escape Edwards, no pun intended, and run up and be part of the Air Force Test Pilot School curriculum. And we use the glider port up there a lot. It's amazing and quite frankly, how humblingly amazing a glider can teach, pilots that believe they're better than average. And so when I have that opportunity to go up, I like the mental release of the drive up. I really enjoy the scenery, especially when there's snow-capped around the mountains in the winter. There's typically significantly more green up there. I like the information I get from the windmills. How much is the wind blowing, what directions it's blowing, and then once you break off tow, the challenge of staying airborne, finding lift, and then enjoying the scenery while you're up there with hearing nothing but the wind is really it's a glorious mental release. And then I land and do it again, and as many times as I can before I have to drive back down and get back to my schedule later in the day. But it's neat. It's a tremendous asset.
It was busy yesterday, I'll tell you. There was a lot out yesterday, and weather was perfect for it. So it was busy yesterday.
Yep, I agree. So one of the ironies about flying gliders is that when you don't want to fly little airplanes because it's bumpy, you definitely want to be flying gliders.
Right. So. And you can catch a little of that Sierra wave and just kind of escape the world.
So I'm more of a glider pilot at this point in my non-powered career than a soaring guy. I'd like to be that good someday. But,
all right. So you stay pretty local then. You don't soar up and down the Sierra Nevadas and.
No, I'm a little less brave.
You can do that?
Oh yeah, you can go. You can take off here, and you can go all the way up Owens Valley and into Utah.
As long as you know the current.
Oh yeah,
wow.
These guys are super
it's
talented.
It's really amazing. I mean, I remember probably 2 years ago, I was there doing my 8th or 10th tow of the day, and a guy landed, and he had just been airborne, I think 7 hours.
Yeah.
Wow! Oh my God!
Yeah.
No, that's a lot of talent. Yeah.
That's unreal. I never realized that.
It's a lot of talent. It's also a very, very high-performance machine. The ones I'm flying are, they're reasonable, but they're classic World War II or just after that design. They're neat.
Yeah,
kind of like flying a Piper Cub in the glider world.
Wanted to ask you one thing, if you don't mind. This is our tribute to the military. Do you have a message that you would like to send out to our veteran community or our active duty military that are listening right now? Your presence is important, and I'd just love to be able to include your thoughts for them.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. Most of them revolve around gratitude. But one of the things that I think is really unique about everyone that's either on active duty or a veteran, and by the way, it's a really small percentage of our nation, and we don't realize it in a community that's dense military like this, but a really small percentage of our nation has ever worn our nation's uniform. Last time I did the math, it was 7% and declining had ever worn a uniform, and 0.7% of Americans were in uniform, all branches of service and all components. So, that's a 1% that I'm really proud to be a part of, and I suspect they are too, but they may not realize just how elite they are and how much the rest of the nation depends on them. Another thing that is really important for me, and I broadcast this to the folks at every opportunity, their willingness to give up a little bit of their freedom or their liberty to defend something bigger than themselves is admirable, beyond which you and I could never describe. And so reminding them of that is hugely important. The concept of a citizen soldier was very unique when the founders started it and implemented it. And still we do that today, pledging an allegiance to not a monarch or a president or anything, but to a constitution is really a unique part of American service that all veterans and soon will be veterans have done. So I thank them for joining that team. I'm very proud to have served with them. I'm really proud of those that are downrange on a holiday like the 4th and sacrificing for all of us. We have obviously some folks from Edwards that are downrange, but anybody that happens to be in harm's way today or tonight owes a lot of gratitude. And we had to take collectively a moment of silence and raise a glass or have a quick thought for them and their families that are separated on a holiday like the 4th.
Amen.
Very well said. Very well said.
General Higer, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. We greatly appreciate it, and thank you for your service to our country. We do appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm nodding politely, and I'll pass it on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate the time, guys.
I think Edwards is lucky to have General Higer in command, and he promised to come on the show again and talk about the air show and a few other things. Before we get to the reading of the Declaration of Independence, we're going to share some more special messages for our active duty and veterans.
Wyatt, happy 4th of July from your Auntie Karen and Uncle Mike. We love you. We miss you. We're proud of you. Thank you for your service. You are in our thoughts and our prayers. We appreciate all you are doing to protect our freedoms. Love you.
U.S. Army veteran Martha Diaz would like to send a shout-out to her husband, Jose Diaz. Both Martha and Jose served together and fell in love while in service, and married on July 4th, 2011. Happy 9th anniversary to this U.S. Army veteran couple. Stephanie Kearns would like to send a shout-out to her 2 active-duty sailor sons. Her eldest son, Jason Kearns, which she hasn't seen since August of 2019, serves as an instructor in New York. Her youngest son, Cody Thompson, which she hasn't seen since January of 2019, is currently stationed overseas. She is very proud of them both and wants to tell them how much she loves and misses them both. Nicole Turpin wants to send a shout-out in remembrance of her father, Brad Taylor, who served in Vietnam and passed away earlier this year. And from myself, I'd like to send a shout-out to my nephew, Cameron Edinburgh, who serves as a first lieutenant for the United States Marine Corps, and in remembrance of my grandfather, Robert Gare, who served in the United States Navy.
Petra Williams asked us to share this message to Seaman Chloe Williams, serving on the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Kimball. We are so proud of you and love you so much. From your family in Tehachapi. A shout-out from Bernie Dominguez to my brother Elliot Marroquin, my friend Tony Velez, who are both serving in the U.S. Army, and to my cousin Dean Zarate, who has served multiple tours in combat serving America. From Candy Hearn to First Sergeant Timothy Petty, 20 years ago you joined the U.S. Army. You have made us so proud for every day of those 20 years. Love, Butch and Mom. Jeannie Settlemeyer sends a shout-out to 1st Battalion, 2nd Division, Marines of Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. My son, Lance Corporal Jacob Settlemeyer, and his Marine Corps brothers who are currently at Camp Lejeune waiting to be deployed this year. Kim and Chris DeVille send a shout-out to all 3 of their children who are currently serving in the U.S. military. A shout-out to Wyatt Budge from Grandpa Vince and Grandma Irene. We are so very proud of your accomplishments, sending all the love, kisses, and hugs.
A special shout out to my son Dylan Essenheimer, who is serving overseas in the United States Army. He's stationed in South Korea. We are so proud of your service.
Co and Maria Budge send out their thanks and appreciation to all who serve our country. You're never forgotten and always appreciated by us. They would like to send a shout out to their 3 boys who are currently serving and served in our military. Brian, who served in the Marine Corps, Eric, who is a captain in the Marine Corps currently, and to Wyatt, who is a PJ in the Air Force on his first deployment in Afghanistan. We're proud of you guys. Gary and Margie Davis say thank you for your service to Wyatt Budge. To Eric and Brian Davis, we couldn't have asked for better grandsons, and send their love. Franco and Jay Espinosa also are sending a message to Wyatt. We love you and miss you. Be safe out there and can't wait to have you back home. I would like to send a message of appreciation to all of our veterans, family of military, and all the men and women serving our great country now. Thank you. Also, I'd like to acknowledge my dad, Don Budge, and uncles Keith and Dwayne, who served our country. And to Wyatt, Aunt Chris and I send our love. Stay safe. We'll see you soon.
Hi, this is Assemblyman Vince Fong. As our nation and our community celebrate our nation's independence this 4th of July, it is always important to also appreciate those serving on active duty at home and abroad, preserving our freedom that we enjoy today. Thank you to the men and women who have volunteered to serve our country and protect our liberty. You have vowed an oath to put your life on the line to preserve the very set of ideals that our founding fathers pledged to defend as they signed the Declaration of Independence 244 years ago. Many celebrations this year will be different. What does not change is our unwavering support to you and your families that have sacrificed so much. So while you are standing watch and protecting all of us, we all owe you a debt of gratitude for the service you have committed for our country. Thank you to each member of our active duty military stationed here and around the world. We thank your families who are also sacrificing as well. We are a grateful community, and it is because of you that we have the ability to celebrate. Thank you, and God bless.
You're listening to Tehachapi.
In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object devices, a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He's called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He's made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for establishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested in power to legislate for all of us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protections and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an indistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable justice over us. We've reminded them of our circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We've appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. We have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they will have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Signed, Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton of New Hampshire. John Hancock, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, Eldridge Gerry of Massachusetts. Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery of Rhode Island. Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Wolcott of Connecticut. William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris of New York. Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark of New Jersey. Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, George Ross of Pennsylvania. Caesar Rodney, George Reed, Thomas McKean of Delaware. Samuel Chase, William Paca, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll of Carrollton of Maryland. George White, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, Carter Braxton of Virginia. William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn of North Carolina. Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton of South Carolina. Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, George Walton of Georgia.
You're listening to Tehachapod.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Tehachapod, our July 4th celebration of freedom. Salute to our military and our veterans. We thank you for joining us. I'm Key Budge. For Greg Garrett and Corey Costelloe, we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Tehachapod is a conversation about Tehachapi designed for the people who live here or who would like to know more about this mountaintop community. If you have a question you would like answered, email media@tehachapicityhall.com. We will try to answer it on a future episode of Tehachapod.